It is not what happens to us that destroys us. God is faithful to his word when he says there would always be a way out. But it is how we perceive what happens to us. And if we try to perceive what happens to us in the context of what we've been conditioned to, we're always going to view God in a flawed way. Because we have to be honest with ourselves that the way I think of love may not go hand in hand with the things God allows. And so the two things that had to come to mind, I said, God, two things that I would bind on my heart is the fact that you are for me and that you are with me. I may not fully understand how you love, but if I can understand two things, because if you're for me, that means that no matter what, it is working out for my good. And if you are with me, then really, what can stand a chance against me? And the question I want to ask you all is that what are the things that you are obsessive about having control over? What are the things that even you use the idea of prayer to control something that may not belong to you? Because sometimes these things are hidden even before us. That God is literally standing in the way of something to happen, and you keep going back to it, and you keep going back to it, and you even use spiritual terms to fight for something that God is saying, I am intervening in this matter, let it go. Because at the end of the day, family, before you ever spoke a word, God heard you. And so if you feel like I need to do more works in a spiritual context, I need to pray about this more, I need to fast about this more, then could it be that you're using the ways of God to gain control of something he's saying to let go? Because again, fear begins as a thought. It's not something that reveals itself that I'm afraid of this. It begins as a thought, so you have confidence in it. But when God is involved in something, you are easily, when we say, Lord, I surrender all unto you, it is easy for you to say, God, you can have this. But when we are so, like, when letting it go, and we start questioning ourselves, but what if this is a test? What if God doesn't want me to let it go? You have to look into that. What is the root of that? Whatever that thing is, if really are you really able to let it go? And if the answer is no, then these are the things that we must come to God and say, Lord, search my heart. What is rooted deep down? Because you are a wonderful counselor. I know I can bring to you everything that I might hide from people, but I can show you my pain. I can show you my brokenness. And Lord, all I'm saying is that search my heart and reveal to me what needs to be uprooted from it. So because of this power that the word of God has, the power that, Lord, I don't even need to ask you for anything additional, because when you speak a word to me, that word cannot fail. So because of that, we always find ourselves at the feet of Jesus saying, God, speak to me concerning my life. Speak to me concerning my business. Speak to me concerning my family. Speak to me concerning this dream. Give me a word, because family, one word from God will change your whole life. So we find ourselves, right? We find ourselves in these places where we're like, God, I need a word from you. That I find myself in this place of confusion and I need you to speak to me. But the beautiful thing about when we ask God to speak to us, and also the dangerous thing, is that we are also inviting God to intervene in our affairs. Now, intervention, one of the ways that you can look at it is when something or someone steps in as an obstacle or barrier to stop something that was already in motion from continuing. And so when we say, God, give me a word about my life, we're basically saying, God, take a look at my life, and whatever is not of you, shut it down. Because I need capacity for what is for me. I need you to close doors so that I can enter the right ones. Right? And this moment, when we say things like this, we shout and we're like, God, you can do it. But the time frame is always where it gets us. Because when there's a shut door, we don't have a blueprint for when the next door is going to open up. And so when there's a short door, we find ourselves in moments of complaining, in moments of frustration, in moments of bitterness, when we find doors that were shut to relationships, doors that were shut to opportunities. And it felt like everything was going well. And then all of a sudden the door shuts. And we don't remember when we ask God, God, give me a word about my marriage, give me a word about my finances, and then you get fired and you're like, the devil is a liar. Because God is making room. He's saying that you have been on a path that I did not ordain it. So when you're asking me to give you a word, I will first intervene in what was never of me, so that I may make room for what is for you. And it's crazy because we have to realize that when God intervenes, He's intervening because we are pouring out ourselves in things, in people, in places, in positions that don't have the capacity for us. You see, these things becomes interesting because the very place that you thought should be a blessing to you, you have now become a burden to it. And this is often what happens when we are pouring ourselves into things that God never ordained. And so you gave everything, you gave all your time, you sacrificed everything for a relationship that you became a burden to. You poured everything to a position that you now became the burden in the place. So the place that you're expecting, God, I'm expecting you to bless me here. Now you are the burden in the place that you were once a builder. Because if God allows us to just go ahead and pour into places that is a leaking vessel, then our story ends there. Our story ends with wasted energy, wasted creativity, wasted wisdom. And for these reasons, God intervenes. There are two creative forces, and that is love and fear. Now, God being love, every word that comes out of His mouth has His personality. Every word that comes out from the mouth of God serves outside of self. Now, when a word that comes from the place of fear, it has the need to protect. It is this deception that I need to protect myself. Now, what is interesting about fear is that oftentimes we think of fear as a feeling. And so we don't even recognize the things that have taken, that we are so confident in, that is actually rooted in fear. Because we think that if I'm afraid of something, I should feel like I'm afraid of this. But there are beliefs that we are so confident in, but is actually rooted in fear. What is that thing in your life that you have an obsessive and almost compulsive need to control? Because what fear does is that it needs control of its environment. This obsessive need you have to protect yourself, to protect your heart, to protect your finances, to protect your kids, to protect your family. All of that is good, but when it becomes out of control, when it becomes this obsessive and compulsion that when you lose the slightest bit of control in any of those areas, you lose it. There is a fear rooted in that. And then we say that no, we're just confident in what we believe. And that is because, family, what I'm learning is that fear does not, first of all, is not a feeling, but fear begins as a thought. And when that thought takes root in your mind, then it begins to shape your actions and your decisions. And so you feel confident about this obsession to protect yourself. And you have reasons for them, and they could be valid. But what if that is rooted in the fear? Because the one thing that can overcome your fears is the right perspective of God. And if we don't seek God for understanding and insight, Isaiah calls Him Wonderful Counselor. That He has a wisdom that will go beyond anything that you could ever think of, that God could speak to the deepest pain of your heart and heal it. And all of a sudden you're praising Him for the very thing that you once thought would kill you. If we don't seek God for understanding, to say, God, I wonder why did this happen? Why did this happen to me as a child? And although we come before him and we're praising him, in our hearts, we're trying to find ways to protect ourselves. Because you see, when oftentimes we talk about love, and for many people it's difficult for them to comprehend that God fully loves them. And that is because, I don't even find it far-fetched, because the concept of God being love, first of all, means that love is as big as God. So the understanding of love would not even be enough in our lifetime. And so what that means to us is that we often try to understand or comprehend or perceive love according to what we've been conditioned to. And so in a society and the way we're raised, we're taught that if someone loves me, they should do what feels good to me. And so how could God love me and this happened to me as a child? How could God love me and he watched all of this happen in my life? God, I understand you're real. I don't doubt that, because I had an experience with you. But there are moments that I question, do you really love me if you allow these things to happen? And we have those questions because we have been conditioned to perceive love a certain way. But love is as big as God. So no matter how much we begin to comprehend love, there is so much more. It goes so much deeper. And so what I began to understand is that, first of all, it's a willing heart to say, God, I want to seek your wisdom. I know this happened to me, and by all means, I don't think this was right. But is there a reason beyond what I see that made you allow it? Is there a reason beyond what I know that made me experience this same heartbreak over and over again? You see, I'm learning, family, that it's not what happens to us that has the ability to destroy us. It's how we process what happens to us. And so, family, what am I saying? I'm saying that sometimes for some of you, you even need to get happy when people don't perceive what you're saying. Because it's not that they're not for you. It's not that they're haters. It's not that they're against you. They're simply not called to what God called you to. And so it should actually give you joy, because God is revealing to you that this person is not supposed to be a part of it. But we want to get bitter. And we want to point fingers and say, you know what, I'm going to show you one day. It's not even about that. Because if they cannot understand what they were never called to. Because at the end of the day, you are not called to everyone on the earth. And the second thing, family, is that when God is intervening in a matter, he's saying that I need to shift you, because you will never have fulfillment in the place you were never called to. You will never find true joy in the place that I did not assign you to. And you are pouring yourself in a place that has nothing connected to the reason that I put you on the earth. And so I'm sharing this, family, because there are some of us, and there are closed doors that we have experienced. And there are closed doors that we will experience. And it is not for us to come in a place where we pout and we're bitter. Because when God intervenes, that means he's actually ordering your steps. That God is saying that, let me show you where and what I have ordained for you.